Hi, I'm Ann Fraser. Welcome to another edition of Bringing Hope to Alzheimer's. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more about my story with my mom and dad, who both were diagnosed in around the age of 70 with dementia or probable Alzheimer's. So once my parents were diagnosed, again, this was back in 2009, and they passed away in 2012. So at that point in time, there was not as many great tools for assessing Alzheimer's and to look at the brain and see what was going on. So typically at that point in time, the only way to find out, that's why quote unquote probable Alzheimer's was the diagnosis that they received. And I've said this before, but both of my parents, they presented a little bit differently. And so once my parents passed away, they passed away 6 months apart from one another in 2012, and they were both 73 years old. And looking back, we can now see that my mom was showing signs of Alzheimer's or some form of dementia back when she was in her 50s. But my dad presented very differently, and he didn't really start showing a lot of signs until he was about, probably 68 to 70, right in there. So they were both diagnosed at the age of 70 and passed away 6 months apart at 73. And so once they passed away, we did what was called at the time brain harvesting. And they may still do that. But we, as children of the three of us, we wanted to know what did they have exactly, because we obviously had both our mom and dad both had some form of dementia. And so they did the brain harvesting, they did the autopsies of the brain, and that's when we found out that my mom did have true Alzheimer's, which seemed pretty textbook Alzheimer's, all of her different conditions and things that she was doing. But my dad had vascular dementia, which is low blood flow to the brain, and mostly to the front of his brain is where it showed that he had a loss of blood flow. He probably, what they think is, had a series of some mini strokes that went undetected. But these days, what they can do is there's so many, you don't have to be gone in order for them to find out what's going on with the brain. And even from the time my parents passed to now, there's so many wonderful diagnostic tools that can be done in order to be able to find out what kind of dementia is it. And again, as I always say, dementia is the umbrella, the big umbrella, and there's lots of different kinds of dementia, and Alzheimer's being the most common type that most people will have. And your typical person is not going to have, typically people won't get Alzheimer's or show signs of Alzheimer's until the age of 65 and beyond is what they consider when people have cognitive decline. But as I've spoke about, we're starting to see that earlier and earlier and earlier. And so just like myself, I was showing signs early on and was diagnosed at the age of 50 with MCI, which is Mild Cognitive Impairment. And that is pre-Alzheimer's. And so there's two stages of pre-Alzheimer's. The first one is called SCI, which is Subjective Cognitive Impairment. And then MCI is the next stage, which is mild cognitive impairment. So if you're taking cognition tests or you're taking the MoCA score, the MoCA test, cognition test, whatever your number is signifies what stage you may probably be at. And so that's where we were able to reverse. I was in MCI, and now my MoCA score and my cognitive scores have returned back to normal or back to 100%. So anyway, it's just kind of, there's some great tools out there now that they've never had before, and they continue to develop those, which makes it so much easier to A, diagnose, and B, treat, and with the potential of having some of your cognition brought back. There is no cure. There is, like my reversal, that doesn't mean that everyone will be able to reverse out, but there's so many things you can do now to change your brain. So my hope for you is that if you're starting to have some cognitive issues, is to get those things checked out. and try some of the diagnostic tools that they have now readily available and see what's going on, because it may not be actually cognitive decline at all. It could just be something like that you're off on, like your hormones or something are off. So I hope that helps, and I appreciate you tuning in today and listening. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time for another edition of Bringing Hope to Alzheimer's.